Hey, what's up guys? It's Zeals. It's been a while. The cam will be off for this one so that I can use this PowerPoint slide. You guys can see everything without my face covering it. And I am also butt naked, but yeah, TMI. Anyways, WAIFU is headed your way in a couple of days, February 26th. And this will be the most up-to-date guide for the wild build. The wild build is more popular at the end game, and it is the meta build of the two currently. Now, there is going to be a balance patch on February 26th, and if WAIFU does get nerfed, I will do an updated guide. This is going to be a very detailed guide, guys, so let's get right into it. So this is the table of contents. We're going to go with the introduction, disclaimer. We're going to go with the builds, arc passive, everything. And we're going to talk about the 3-2-3 settings. And if you don't know what that means, I'll explain everything. We're going to talk about the 24 seconds versus the 30 seconds, over gauge, opening rotation, tips and tricks. Basically, we're going to cover everything here. If there's anything I missed, make sure you join my stream, like and subscribe if this was helpful. So anyways, introduction, I will try to cut the fat. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how the class feels. I've already done videos like that in the past in my channel. I'm not going to compare this class to another class, how it feels and why you should play it. This is more going to be a very detailed build guide for the wild build, the meta build, for the meta chasers, the main swappers. All right, before we get right in, I just want to let you guys know we're gonna have timestamps for everything, and I'm going to give a very detailed class breakdown as well as some tips and tricks, very important tips and tricks you need to know. But before we do so, we're going to do an under 60-second overview of the spec, the Wild Instincts, the Wild spec. So this article written by AGS, the official Twitter, it's pretty inaccurate. Yeah, the synergy, they got that right, 12% damage reduction. And if we go into comments here, I'm pretty sure every fourth skills is stronger, only applies to Z identity. Yes, that is correct, and there is a misinfo here. It depends on the build you choose. Nope. So before I show you guys what this means right here, the stacks, to really simplify it, we got the green skills. It's not just bear and fox. We got the green skills. I call them the human skills. We got the yellow, the bear skills, and then the blues are the fox skills. So think of the green skills as utility. We got the synergy skill here, and we got the counter skill here, and then this, all the green skills give the middle gauge, the green jar, ball, whatever you want to call them. The reason why you need the middle gauge is because when you use these bear skills and the fox skills, it's going to use the gauge in the middle. It's going to empty it out. So I'm going to use all these animal skills, the blue skills. As you can see, it depletes, and the only way to pretty much regenerate them is with the green skill or the awakening. Bam! So simply, it's going to be a juggling of the gauges. You have 3 of them. We got the middle, you got the bear, and you got the fox. Now, as you feel the gauge, as you can see, when you use a bear skill, it's going to activate the bear Z. If I use a fox skill, it's going to activate the fox Z. Now, you want to use that with the 3 stacks you see right here. So before we get into the detail part, you need to have the middle gauge to be able to spend your animal skills if they're off cooldown. And you want to have 3 stacks. You want to have these 3 stacks before you press the Z skill, whether it's bear Z or it is the fox Z. You see that I don't have the gauge right there, so I can't get the fox skill. And if I use the human skill, I lose my stacks. So basically, I want to have full middle gauge, and then once again, do 3 animal skills, and then use the Z with 3 stacks. So I put January 22nd because she did get a buff to the 3-2-3 build, making that build pretty much the king right now. We'll see, right? February 26th, there is a balance patch, and we don't know what's going to happen. So if there are any updates, if there is a better build, I will let you guys know in a future video. Some FAQs, caster versus wild. The 2 specs for WAIFU, which is more popular in the end game. Currently, this is not an opinion, but wild is more popular. 3-1-4 versus 3-2-3. So the 3 refers to the 3 green skills, 1 refers to the bear skill, and 4 fox skills versus 3-2-3. So this one, as you can see, has 3 green skills, 2 bear skills on your 8 skill sets. Well, technically 3 if we count the T skill, and 3 fox skills. That's the 3-2-3 build. I'm letting you guys know these terminologies in case you look up other builds. It could be like 3-2-3 versus 3-3-2 or 3-1-4. So yeah, The latest balance batch in January 22nd made 323 stronger, so it is more popular in the end game. Tier placement, SSS tier, she is crazy strong, crazy strong. But once again, February 26th, I'm gonna have to say this, I have to repeat myself with the February 26th. If there are any changes, I will let you know with a future update, because, you know, the build might be outdated by then. We'll see. All right, so 323 settings, arc passive, crit, you go 10 points, spec 30 out of 30. It's a spec class. And on the second row, you can go with the 4th node here, the push-up man. I don't really know the English names, my bad. You could put 3 out of 3 points, or you could go with the 3rd option, 2 out of 2 for the crit rate. And the rest of the points on the push-up man on the 4th node. Get 3rd node if you need crits due to no relic engraving. So 2 out of 2 with the crit one, the one that gives 8% crit. On the 3rd tier, 3rd row, whatever you want to call it, first, you could go 2 out of 2, or the first one, 1 out of 2, and then the second one, 1 out of 2. These are the recommended builds. Either go all into the blue one, or you split 1 on each. You don't want to really go 2 into the yellow axe guy. On the last line, we're gonna go with the 4th node, 2 out of 2. No brainer there. For those that still don't know how to calculate their own crit rate, because all they do is follow community guides, we're gonna do this again just like last year. So this is including the 100 crit stat on your bracelet. That's about 24% from your combat stats, the crit combat stats. Adrenaline, if you have legendary, 14%, up to 20% with relic. Class, arc passive, class gives 30%, not to all your skills, but fox bear skills. So if you go to Trixie and your crit rate is like showing 70% when you're supposed to be 90 or 100, don't come complain to me, because you can't listen or you can't read. It's for the fox and bear skills, 30%. That's what's important anyways. And second row of arc passive, if you do go into this blue skill, that's 4 to 8%. Third row, we have 12% coming from here. And if you're gonna go with Master Elixir, we're gonna talk about that as well. 8% coming from there. Synergy 10%, as well as the supporters bracelet. So these are all your sources of crits, and you need to know that so that you don't have too little crit or over crits. All right, let's continue. If full legendary adrenaline, here are my recommendations. You can go either left or you can go with right. I prefer the left one, so that's why it's bigger. And if you're fortunate enough to have full relic adrenaline, here are my recommendations. You can go with 3 into this node, and either 1 or 2 into the mana one on the 3rd tier, the 3rd row. Once again, depends on your crit rates. If you have like a fixed static 10% crit synergy, as well as a dedicated support with a nice bracelet, you know, all of that stuff. Now for the class arc passive, here are the recommendations. You're gonna go obviously with the class 3 over here. You're gonna go with the 4th node. The 4th node is very good. If you have any spare points, you want to go in 1 into here, just 1. This is for the spacebar cooldown. It's really nice. You just want to have 1 point. It does make a difference in actual combat. And the rest, if you have spare, into here. Now, for the leap, here are the recommendations. You can play around with this. If you want less CD, you can take points off, put it into the Hyper Awakening. But these are the recommendations. As for the engravings, these are pretty much fixed. In terms of the engraving priority, Hitmaster is the last one. If you have stabilized status, you could use that as well. In terms of stone cutting priority, and you're only going to play a wild spec, then this is the priority. Adrenaline, Keen Blunt, Cursed Thal, Hitmaster, and Grudge for cutting rocks. After 80% crit rate, Keen Blunt plus Adrenaline Rock is the best. You can use stabilized status instead of Cursed Thal if you really hate the potion penalty from Cursed Thal. She does gain damage reduced from bear form coming from the class arc passive, as well as natural self-heal from the arc passive, her class arc passive. But if you really hate Cursed Thal, then you could go with stabilized status. If you really love stabilized status, you could use it instead of Hitmaster, or you could just go with the bread and butter here. The last thing, if you use that mana engraving, I forgot what it's called. I haven't had my caffeine shot yet. I swear to God, all right? It does not increase the damage of your Z. your Z does not cost mana. As for the elixirs, if using legendary adrenaline, master is better than critical by 0.5%. If using legendary adrenaline plus crit synergy, maybe you also got a dedicated support with a crit bracelet, master is better than critical by 0.31% at full master stacks. So if you lose master stacks, then obviously it's gonna not be as useful. Recommendations for higher potential, for higher ceiling, use the one that has better rolls. 5/5 attack power master or attack power critical versus 3/5. Critical has higher potential if you have relic adrenaline, engraving, and or crit synergy, support bracelet included. You hate white text, you hate not critting, get master then. As for the panties, critical damage wins by 0.24 to 0.38%. So this is the accessory priority list at max roll. Max roll outgoing damage, 2%. Does not share diminishing returns with other outgoing damage. Additional damage, I hope I'm translating this, or I hope the Aegis version translated it in-game correctly, but it's the one with the max of 2.6%. That does share diminishing returns. If you look in the character profile, it shares diminishing returns with other additional damage coming from, for example, like 100 quality weapon, if you have additional damage on your panties or your bracelet, etc. So it ranges from 1.8 to 2%. Crit damage has high value, as you can see, 1.4 to 1.5%. Attack percentage earring, max 1.36. And weapon attack, you guys can see that. So right here, there's a star. Weapon attack percentage earring starts beating attack percentage earring at endgame. All right, so it kind of flips. I would just see the floor here, the floor and the ceiling. The ceiling, not much difference, but you can see the floor. I would just get whatever is cheaper, to be honest. As for attack percentage versus weapon attack at mid-roll, they're about the same, okay? And crit ring, max, well, she's gonna get a lot of crit coming from the class arc passive, the 30% on the animal skills. So crit doesn't have that much value. As for the skills, these are the skills and the levels. Now I have a couple slides. So I have this one. You can pause the video and you can see the tripod icons. Some people like icons. You can see where the gems are, what the runes are. So here, I know it's not in English. I don't really know what these skills are going to be called in English, but here are the icons and the skill icons. So you can pause the video, and I have another one for old-fashioned folks. So you can see, like, this is going to be, I hope it's translated into YAP, but we don't know for sure. So, well, at least I don't know for sure. So yeah, you can see the skill levels and the runes, as well as the tripod. 311 refers to left to right. So this is 1, 2, 3. So if it's 311, you see how that is 311 for anybody new. All right. And this one, for this one right here, I think it might be called Scratch. Quick recharge is very, very important for this build. It's really, really nice. You can use either 3 or 2, that's preference. And for those that have mana issues, you can use the blue wealth here and put the mana rune here instead. And conviction judgment, I highly recommend it. It's not to really increase your DPS. It's just, don't think of it like that. If you don't proc it every time, it's fine. It's fine. It's mostly for the mana savings as well as the green gauge. And another for the skills, you can see the skill level, the skill icon, the tripod icons, and the runes and the gems. Now for the gems, I will have a dedicated gem section. This is not correct. I just didn't have the silver to reroll. I'm tight on silver right now, working on 3 new characters. And speaking of the gems, damage and priority, we have the Z skill. So the Z skill comprises about 30% actual damage, about 30%, give or take a couple percentages at max karma. Obviously, the more points you put into the T skill, it's gonna take that pie. But anyways, so what I'm trying to say here is that if you have a level 10 tier 3 gem, keep it at tier 3. That's what I'm trying to say with the Z. And then this is the next priority. It's a set. That's a set. As for cooldown, this is the order. This is a set, and this is a set. So it's gonna be 6 damage gems, 5 cooldown gems. So a lot of damage gems means a little bit higher ceiling. Now, don't be like, oh man, 6 damage gems, I can't. That's too much. No, come on, man. Like if you're using level 7, level 8 gems, it doesn't really matter. It's like 2K difference versus a cooldown gem, at least the last time I checked. And for the cooldown gems, it's fine if you have level 6, level 7 cooldowns, they're fine. It's not like a cycle class, like, oh, first intent war dance to trauma or SO war dance to trauma. It's not like you're waiting on a couple skills to start your rotation, pre-buff, or put a debuff and then start your, it's not a cycle dealers. So cooldown gems, the higher the better, but if you don't got those, that's fine. That's fine. It's not like you need a certain cooldown gem to make your rotation or cycle work, because we don't have a cycle or rotation except for the opener. All right, now we're gonna go into more of the detail part. So the 24 seconds versus 30 seconds, you might hear this term. So I want to just explain it. The 24, like what the term means is that 24 seconds cycle. It's not really a cycle, but these skills have a 24-second cooldown. So as you can see, we can use this skill into this skill and then finish with the bear skill. And then we can use the bear Z, or we can go with this. We can go with this skill into this skill, into this skill, and then use the fox Z. I will show you guys that later. And then we have the 30-second skills. While the T skill is not really 30 seconds. That's, we're just like, people like to, it's just they group it together, but once I'm gonna explain it, you don't have to use these together. It's just like a combo that you can use at the end when you're about to fill the gauge. So you can see that you have the T skill into this bear skill, into the fox flame skill, and then you could use the fox Z, and vice versa, and use the bear Z at the end. The key point is when close to filling your gauge, freely build 3 stacks and Z. Don't get prisoned by this terminology. I know you'll see this a lot in a lot of guides, but you gotta be free from this. You don't necessarily have to group these together or wait for these and group them together. What is important, you build 3 stacks. You could even use 3 bear skills, or you could use 3 fox skills. As long as you get the 3 stacks and then use Z without over capping your gauge, it's fine. And if you need to use one more skill, you need to use 4 or 5 skills even to get that Z before the boss phases, so be it. I'm just explaining the terminology and trying to tell you guys, don't be imprisoned by this. It will kill your DPS. All you need to know is like, yeah, it's nice to like group these up when the boss isn't moving or in a nice opener and stuff like that. But if it gets dirty out there, it is what it is. All right. Waiting just to do this perfect 24, going to this skill, to this skill, to this skill, and then bear Z. If you're waiting for that, it can be a DPS loss. If the boss is about to phase, or a massive cutscene, or you got to walk across a bridge or something in the new raid in gate 1, blah, 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 right? Let's talk about over gauge. Building gauge is the most important point, guys. Filling the gauge. We got 3 gauges, so we got to make sure. So we got to make sure to fill up this gauge. As you can see, using the fox and the bear skills depletes this jar, and in order to refill that, you need to use these green skills. Okay, so managing your gauge, let me just spend some gauge here. Managing your gauge is the most important thing. Look at that, I just used like all of those skills. That's fine, that's fine. Okay, build this gauge, build this gauge, build a bear. So build the jar, build the green gauge, build the bear gauge, build the fox gauge. All that is important is you building gauge. And when you're about to finish building the gauge, how you do the finisher is important. So gauge is good because you can use Z, and Z is big damage. So building gauge is very important, but you don't want to over cap the gauge, guys. So you don't want to over cap it. So if I use 3 fox skills, it's gonna definitely over cap the fox gauge. What I could have done instead, when I have a sliver of that fox gauge left, is use 2 bear skills into a fox skill and then Z. And the same thing with the bear gauge. Instead of using a fox and then finishing with 2 bear skills, we're just gonna do this instead. 2 fox skills into a bear into a Z. Okay, so there's a little bit of that mini game in your brain. You got to plan out a little bit on the spot. Next, let go. Let your brain go of trying to do it like a cycle or rotation. Wild. It's a wild soul build. Okay, be free, be wild. Build gauge fast, top priority, and plan ahead of how you want to dump your gauge with Z during burst windows with atropine support buffs. There's so many scenarios of this. For example, do you want to only build up this Fox gauge and then use the Fox Z, or do you want to build up, do you have enough time to build up both the bear and the Fox gauges and then burst with the support buff and atropine? Is the boss going to stay still? There are certain windows during the boss phase where they let you do that. So is it going to be a quick burst where you just fill up the Fox and then Z and then do mechanics, run around, dodge while building gauge and slamming your skills, doing massive damage? Or is it like a hidden ally forces skill time where the boss is going to stay stationary? So you're like 10 seconds out, you want to build the bear gauge and have the Fox gauge ready and then just burst like crazy with both Z's. You got to think about that. It's okay to overcap a little bit with the gauge, but you don't want to overcap too much. So let me give you like a scenario. Let's just say you're about to fill up the Fox gauge. So let's do this. And then you do that and you forget to Z. Uh-oh. You know what I mean? You were spamming, you were jamming your keys too much and you forgot to Z there. Now you're overcapped a lot versus overcapping a little bit. That's an example of overcapping a lot versus overcapping a little bit. Now the opening rotation is going to look like this. The highest ceiling opening rotation. I know it looks like a lot of skills. You don't have to pull this off. It's okay. It's a broken class for now. Triple Z opener with an awakening. Practice this, or you don't have to. You could just YOLO. But here's a rotation. This is your synergy skill, 12% armor break, armor reduction. And you're going to quickly build 3 adrenaline stacks here. Now I grouped these up together because you want to use this skill and immediately use the animal skills. Okay, in general you want to use this and then couple it with an animal skill immediately. So let me show you guys this. You throw it and then boom, it refills. Okay, let me show you guys again another animal skill. It doesn't matter what the animal skill is, so you throw it and it refills it versus watch this, versus just doing this. You see that? So you want to throw this and then use an animal skill. Boom! Replenishes it, so you can use more animal skills before you have to refill the jar. But in the opening rotation, this is what you're going to do. You're going to group this together. You're going to throw this and immediately use this skill. And then you're going to use the bear skill. So 1, 2, 3 stack. And then Fox Z. Atropine with it. Boom! And then you're going to use the T skill. Upper Shoryuken. Bear Shoryuken. Into a second animal skill. And then you may be thinking, why are you weaving Fox and Bear? Another good question, right? So if you do read the class arc passive, Fox gives attack speed. So that's versus that. So that's a little bit of min-maxing so that the bear skill after the Fox skill gets enhanced by the attack speed. It's a tighter rotation, okay? So anyways, we're gonna go into the T into Fox, which enhances the speed of this bear skill. That's 3 stacks into a bear Z. That's in the atropine still. And then we're gonna use this skill right here into the awakening and then refresh your synergy. And then we're going to use another charge of this skill, put it on cooldown. And then we're going to use the second T because we have 2 charges. And then we're going to throw this skill and then immediately use this skill and then into the bear, which gets enhanced attack speed. And then we're going to get the 3rd stack here and into a Z and then finish with the bear. Now, why did I group these 2 together? So before you use the Fox Z, this skill has multiple ticks. You want to use this skill and then commit to the Z right away so that you don't over gauge. And this carries on over to the new gauge bar. So let me show you guys that. That's a little confusing. Remember, what did I teach? We're going to throw this skill and we're going to build 3 stacks, but we're going to finish on the Fox skill. Okay, on the Fox skill. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with this. So we're going to start with this. So we're going to throw this, immediately use this. All right. So do that. And then we're going to go, I'm going to slow it down. We're going to use this skill because it gets enhanced by this one, the attack speed. And then we're going to use this and immediately Z as those ticks give gauge. All right. So let me show you that in high speed. We're going to do E into A. E into A. Once again, it doesn't always have to be like that, right? Like, what if A is not up on cooldown? But this is, you know, the opener, so it should be off cooldown, right? So we're gonna do this once again, fast, boom. It fills up that gauge, do that, getting attack speed increase, and then S, and then Z right away, getting a little bit of that Fox gauge back. That's what I mean when you pair it together, guys. That's what I mean by not over gauging. Or you could just open it like this, guys, and practice. All right, I try to do this by saying go from Q to W to Q, but it was taking way too long, okay? So I'm just gonna show you guys in a slower rotation, but all you need to do is open this up and then just practice right along. So here we go. And then we're gonna use A, and then we're gonna fill up the gauge with the awakening so that we can go right back into the animal skills. See, it fits perfectly. Bam! It fits perfectly, guys. So that's a triple Z burst opener. Granted that the boss doesn't move. Okay. If it's not perfect, it's okay. Now, tips and tricks. Awakening potion is huge. So use this skill and quickly go into Fox or Bear skill so that you can top off your middle gauge. All right. So this was changed on January 22nd balance patch. Also, another tip is idle in the right form before big cutscenes. So before like a cutscene or you're locked, let's say like Gate 2, you're moving to in his like, you know how you're shuffling scene transition. You don't want to be like locked into this position. You have full bear gauge. You want to be naturally gauging. You want to be either getting the middle gauge or recovering the Fox gauge. So whatever you want to decide to do. This build doesn't lose a lot from idling or cutscenes. It benefits us. It's kind of crazy. Even if you get knocked down, you fall down, or there are scene transitions or cinematics, or you can't use any of your skills and you're forced to cross a bridge in Gate 1 of the third active Kazar's raid against Thaymine 2.0, blah, 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 blah. Don't forget the attack speed boost coming from the wolf form. So weave as much as you can to tighten your rotation to land as many skills. So you could do a Fox, Fox, Bear, or Fox, Bear, Fox. Now, once again, you don't have to do that. If you don't have any Fox skills, you could just go Bear, 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 and then Bear Z if that's what you need to do, right? And also, one thing I forgot is you don't have to always use these three skills together. Wait, once again, let me deplete this bear gauge. Okay. So you don't have to use these skill. You know what? Let me also deplete. Let me deplete the Fox gauge as well. Okay. So when you're in this kind of situation, you don't have to use these three skills together like that. You don't have to. I mean, it's nice because the cooldowns are all on cooldown at the same time. They come all back up at the same time. But you can just do this. You can just mash anything. You could weave like this. You could weave. You could go green, blue, right? Green, blue. You could weave it like that if the gauge is low. If the gauge is low, once again, okay? So I deplete the gauge on purpose. So what you could do is you could do like this. You could weave like this. You could smash a couple animal skills like this. It really doesn't matter. It's very situational. You have the freedom. If you want to burst with these two skills and the boss is about to phase, you can just do that. These three stacks. The only time it matters is when you're about to Z. Outside of that, if you have really low gauge, you could just weave like this, weave like that. You could do that, right? So you could weave if you have low gauge. All right. Once again, use the Foxy right away after a Fox skill so you don't overcap, and then you can build the gauge again for the Fox gauge. Don't just sit in Bear Fox form when you need green gauge. Press X to exit out of Bear Fox skill if your green skills are on cooldown. What does that mean? Okay, so let's say you're like this and you're like, oh, I don't have these skills. Just press X because you're recovering now. Then keep recovering, okay? That's another tip. So X is there if you want to get out of Bear or Fox form. Don't forget you have up to 4 counters. This skill right here, 3 charges. They count as a counter. Leave 1 stack of this skill for counter or mobility, or just use it for gauge damage, up to you. If you need damage reduce before a mechanic's about to happen, go into Bear form because Bear form has damage reduce. If you want cheaper bracelet cut spec instead of spec crit, you could go with spec intellect or just spec. instead of spec crit. Spec is way more important. You're gonna get a lot of crit anyways. There are lots, like I showed you guys, there are a lot of ways, like I showed you guys, there are a lot of ways to get crits, okay? And that's pretty much gonna be it. If you have any questions, drop by my Twitch